The sun dipped low across the African horizon 1.8 million years ago, casting long shadows over the savanna. This was the world of Homo erectus, our ancestor, taller and stronger than the Homo habilis before them, armed with fire, stone tools, and a growing mind that sought not only to survive, but to shape the world around them. But the land was not theirs alone. The savannas, rivers, and forests were ruled by giants. Saber-tooth cats with fangs like daggers prowled silently in the tall grass. Crocodiles longer than 3 men slid unseen beneath the water's surface, patient and merciless. For Homo erectus, every step was a test of courage, every drink of water a gamble with death. The clan moved cautiously that evening. A dozen men, women, and children huddled together, carrying sharpened spears hardened by fire. They had learned something their ancestors never fully mastered: unity. Alone, each human was weak. Together they could hunt, defend, and sometimes, only sometimes, defy the predators that stalked them. They approached a watering hole, the last glimmer of sunlight reflecting across its still surface. Thirst burned their throats, but they hesitated. This was predator ground. Homo erectus had no illusions. The watering holes belonged to the crocodiles, and the tall grass belonged to the saber-tooths. A low growl drifted across the plains. The humans froze. From the shadows, eyes glowed, amber and unblinking. Smilodon fatalis, the saber-tooth, stepped forward. Its shoulders rippled with muscle, its fangs gleaming in the twilight. At its side, another cat prowled, circling the humans like wolves would circle prey. The leader of the clan, a man scarred from an earlier hunt, raised his burning torch high. Flames hissed, sparks rising into the night. Fire was the one weapon even the great predators respected. The cats hissed, low and threatening, but they did not retreat. The smell of weakness, children, the old, the injured, was too strong. The standoff stretched, silence broken only by the crackle of fire and the rumbling growls of the predators. The humans shouted, waved their torches, stamped their feet, but then the saber-tooths lunged. Chaos erupted. Spears thrust forward, torches swung, the air filled with the scent of burning wood and the shrieks of terrified children. One of the cats was struck, blood spraying across the ground. It roared in pain and fury, retreating momentarily. But the second cat came faster, aiming for a boy at the edge of the group. The leader moved without hesitation. His spear plunged forward, firelight glinting on the sharpened stone tip. It struck the saber-tooth in the shoulder. Not a killing blow, but enough to slow it. The humans pressed forward as one, driving the beasts back, fire roaring, voices rising in defiance. At last, the cats withdrew, vanishing into the tall grass, their eyes lingering like ghosts. They had not been defeated, only delayed. They would return. Homo erectus knew this truth. Predators did not give up easily. Exhausted, the clan approached the water's edge, desperate for relief. But as the first woman knelt to drink, the surface exploded. A monstrous crocodile surged upward, jaws snapping shut with a sound like cracking bone. The humans screamed as water churned red. The battle with the cats had weakened their defenses, and now the river claimed its price. Another spear flew, striking the reptile's armored hide. Torches were thrust into its face, flames hissing against wet scales. The beast thrashed, dragging its victim under the surface, bubbles rising. Then silence. The clan staggered back, grief in their eyes. They had faced 2 enemies within a single hour, the fangs of the cats and the jaws of the river. This was life for Homo erectus. A world where every moment of survival was carved from blood, fire, and unbreakable unity. But they would endure. Because for the first time in human history, endurance was their weapon. They were no longer prey alone. Fire burned in their hands, tools shaped by thought, and courage passed from one generation to the next. And so the clan retreated into the night, flames lighting their path, hearts heavy with loss but unbroken. Tomorrow, they would hunt again. Tomorrow, they would return to the water. Tomorrow, they would face the beasts once more. Because this was their world too. The night had fallen heavy upon the savanna, blanketing the grasslands in shadows that stretched like endless hands. For Homo erectus, night was both a shield and a curse. Fire crackled at the center of their circle, pushing back the darkness just enough to reveal the fear etched into their faces. They were not the rulers of this world. Not yet. Every flicker of the flames reminded them that beyond its glow lay eyes waiting, teeth glinting, muscles coiled in silence. It was at the waterhole, days earlier, that they had first felt the full weight of the crocodiles. A herd of antelope had crowded close to drink, hooves crunching against the mud, their nervous snorts betraying the unease every creature shared when approaching water. The river did not flow with peace. It pulsed with hidden predators. The young hunter who had leaned too close learned this truth too late. With a sudden eruption, the surface shattered, and the massive jaws of a prehistoric crocodile, twice the size of any beast today, clamped down with bone-crushing force. The boy had no time to scream. His body was dragged beneath the water, swallowed by thrashing waves and crimson froth. When silence returned, only ripples remained. The others had fled, terrified, their spears raised, but useless against a monster that vanished as swiftly as it appeared. That night they huddled in grief and dread. Crocodiles ruled the water. To drink, to fish, even to bathe was to tempt death. But thirst was unforgiving, and they had no choice but to return. The next evening, they tried again, this time with fire in their hands. Flames hissed as dried reeds were set alight, and the group approached the water's edge cautiously, their shadows dancing across the surface. The crocodiles lurked beneath, but even monsters hesitated before fire. When one slid forward, its ridged back slicing through the shallows, the hunters thrust their torches toward it. Sparks rained, smoke swirled, and the crocodile halted, its jaws gaping in silent fury. It did not retreat far, but that moment of hesitation was enough. For the first time, Homo erectus felt they had wrestled fear back from the beasts. But on land, another terror stalked them. The saber-tooth cats. These predators were not lions as we know them now. They were larger, more powerful, their fangs curved like ivory daggers built to pierce through bone and sinew. A single strike from their jaws could silence even the strongest prey. And unlike the crocodiles, the saber-tooths did not vanish into water. They hunted in silence, always near, always watching. One moonless night, the hunters had gathered close around their fire when a scream tore through the darkness. A lone gatherer, returning late with roots clutched in his hands, had been caught. The group rushed toward the sound, flames raised, only to find the ground painted with blood. The gatherer was gone, dragged into the tall grass. In the distance, faint snarls echoed, joined by the crunch of breaking bones. The hunters froze. To chase was suicide, to do nothing was despair, but survival demanded learning. The next day, they studied the tracks. Huge paw prints, deep and heavy, marked the soil. Here they saw the imprint of a body dragged away. There, claw marks gouged into the earth. It was a language written in death, and they began to read it. Every trail taught them more: how saber-tooths circled, how they waited near paths to the river, how they chose the weakest prey. That evening, they set a trap. Not of wood or rope, for they had not yet mastered such tools, but of fire and bravery. They placed their torches in a wide circle, embedding them into the ground so that flickering walls of flame stood like sentinels. At the center, they huddled together, weapons gripped tightly, listening to the night. The cats came, their eyes glowing like lanterns in the grass. Low growls rolled across the savanna, vibrating in the hunters' chests. The circle of fire held them back, but not for long. Hunger made them bold. One cat lunged, its body cut through the smoke, muscles rippling, fangs flashing white. A spear struck its side, another pierced its shoulder, but the beast kept coming. Only when the fire scorched its fur did it recoil, roaring with rage. The hunters roared back, voices rising above fear, their cries shaking the night. For once, they did not scatter. They stood together, and the saber-tooths retreated. Yet victory was fragile. The beasts never gave up. Days later, at dawn, the hunters found themselves shadowed again. They had moved camp closer to the river, hoping the water would shield one side, but this only invited new dangers. While the crocodiles waited below, the cats stalked above. One hunter, carrying water in a carved gourd, slipped near the bank. The splash drew the crocodile instantly. A massive shape surged upward, jaws wide, teeth glistening. Before it could strike, a saber-tooth leapt from the grass, colliding with the reptile in an explosion of chaos. Blood sprayed the air as cat and crocodile clashed, each predator fighting for dominance. The hunters could only watch, frozen between horror and awe. For once, the beasts fought each other instead of them. But such battles were not salvation. They were warnings. The world belonged to predators. Homo erectus was merely a trespasser in their kingdom. Still, within these struggles, sparks of change glowed. They learned that fire pushed the cats back. They learned that sharp stones, bound to wood, pierced deeper than crude branches. They learned to move not as individuals, but as one. And slowly, the fear that once crushed them began to turn into something else. Not confidence, not yet, but defiance. Each night was a gamble between survival and annihilation. Each dawn was a fragile victory. But with every encounter, they grew stronger. The predators had ruled for millions of years, but now, for the first time, prey was beginning to fight back. The saber-tooth still prowled, the crocodiles still lurked. But within the glow of fire and the sharpness of stone, Homo erectus was beginning to carve a future. And though many would fall, their struggle would echo through generations, shaping the destiny of humankind itself. The river glistened under the morning sun, a wide artery of life cutting through the savanna. Its surface shimmered golden, yet beneath it lurked shadows older and deadlier than even the saber-toothed cats. The crocodiles, giant armored reptiles, had ruled these waters for millions of years, long before Homo erectus had dared to drink from them. And now, as hunger pressed hard, fire smoke filled the skies and predators prowled the land, the river seemed both salvation and a death trap. The band of Homo erectus approached cautiously, their bare feet sinking into the mud. Thirst clawed at their throats. The dry season had turned many waterholes into dust. Mothers carried infants at their hips, men clutched crude spears of sharpened wood, and the elders trailed behind, bones creaking but eyes still sharp. The water promised life, yet all of them knew, just beyond the surface, a nightmare might be waiting. The silent killers of the river. The first cry came from the reeds. A young male crouched too close, dipping his hands into the water to scoop a drink. In an instant, the surface exploded. A massive crocodile surged upward, jaws gaping wide, teeth glinting like ivory daggers. The youth screamed as its teeth clamped onto his thigh, pulling him into the depths. Chaos erupted. Stones were thrown, spears thrust wildly into the water, shouts and cries blending into a deafening storm. Blood stained the river's edge, swirling red ribbons across the current. The crocodile rolled, twisting with monstrous strength, dragging its prey deeper into the murk. The group retreated in terror, pulling children back, their cries echoing into the trees. Some clutched burning sticks from their torches, waving them at the water's edge, though flames meant little against jaws honed by millennia. The water went still again. Only bubbles rose to the surface, mocking their loss. For hours, silence reigned among them. A life had been stolen, just as swiftly as a fire-snuffed ember. Predators of two worlds Homo erectus now stood trapped between worlds. On land, saber-tooth cats waited in ambush, shadows moving silently through tall grasses. In the water, crocodiles lurked, their armored bodies blending with the river's flow. Every choice carried risk. Thirst demanded water. Hunger demanded hunting. But each attempt at survival meant stepping into the domain of monsters. At night, the crocodiles slid onto the muddy banks, their heavy bodies glistening under the moonlight. They moved with eerie silence, watching, waiting for any wanderer who strayed too close. The tribe huddled together by their fire, the glow pushing back both feline and reptilian eyes that glittered in the dark. And yet fire could not last forever. Embers died, torches burned low, and predators were patient. A bold hunt. One day, desperation drove the group to a daring act. The men, lean from hunger but sharpened by necessity, fashioned a plan. They would lure a crocodile out of the river, distract it, and strike with sharpened spears hardened in the flames. The risk was immense, but the reward, meat, hide, and bones, could sustain them. At dawn, a group of hunters waited cautiously near the bank, shouting and stamping to stir the lurking beast. The water rippled. Then a shape rose, a crocodile longer than 3 men, its eyes unblinking, its jaws yawning wide in a hiss that chilled the blood. The hunters shouted. One threw a burning torch into its face and the creature lunged, surging onto the mud with terrifying speed. Its tail whipped the ground like thunder, scattering dirt. The hunters fanned around it, spears raised. The clash was violent. Spears jabbed into its armored hide, bouncing off at first, then finding softer gaps near its jaws and belly. The beast thrashed, snapping with bone-crushing force, nearly tearing a spear wielder in half. But together, screaming with primal fury, Homo erectus pressed their attack. One hunter drove a flaming spear deep into its eye, and at last, with a final shudder, the crocodile collapsed. Victory. The tribe roared, not just from triumph, but from survival itself. For the first time they had slain one of the river gods. Feast and fear. That night, they feasted. Flesh roasted over fire, fat dripping into the flames, filling the air with the smell of victory. Children gnawed on bones, women carved hide into strips, and the men sat with proud, weary faces. They had taken from the monster, and in doing so, claimed a piece of power once thought untouchable. Yet even as they ate, predators watched. On the other side of the firelight, a pair of saber-tooth cats crouched low, golden eyes fixed on the feast. Their muscles quivered, tails flicking in the dark. One wrong step, one moment of weakness, and the hunters would become hunted once more. The fire crackled, its sparks rising like stars. Homo erectus tightened their circle, gripping spears, knowing this balance of survival was endless. Victories were fleeting, dangers eternal. The endless struggle. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm of encounters and escapes. Sometimes the cats struck, their roars splitting the silence as they tested the flame's reach. Sometimes the river monsters surged, dragging away a goat, a child, or an unlucky wanderer. But through it all, Homo erectus endured. Each battle carved lessons into their memory, where to step, when to wait, how to strike together. Fire was their shield, spears their teeth, and courage their only constant. In these crucibles of terror, their minds sharpened. Fear became strategy. Loss became knowledge. Each encounter etched survival deeper into their bones. And though predators ruled the land and rivers, something new had emerged. An unyielding will in the hearts of these humans. A determination that whispered, "We will not only survive. One day, we will dominate." The night was alive with whispers, crackling fire, low growls in the distance, the uneasy breath of families huddled together. For countless generations, predators had ruled without question. The saber-tooth cats prowled the grasslands, crocodiles ruled the rivers, and humans had been little more than prey, stealing scraps when the killers were done. But something had changed. At the center of the tribe's camp burned a fire larger than any before, its flames licking high into the night. Sparks swirled upward like fireflies, and the smoke carried a message across the savanna. A new force was rising. Around that fire sat Homo erectus, their faces painted orange by the glow, their eyes fixed not on fear, but on possibility. The spark of strategy. It began with observation. Homo erectus had watched how lions hunted in groups, how hyenas circled and harassed, how even small animals survived by cunning. Slowly, their own minds began piecing together patterns. When saber-tooth cats stalked close, the tribe no longer scattered in panic. Instead, they moved together, forming a ring around the fire. Spears angled outward, voices rising in unison with shouts and growls meant to mimic the predators themselves. Firebrands waved high, the burning tips searing the night air. The first time they stood their ground, the saber-tooth lunged and nearly tore a hunter apart. But the tribe pressed forward as one, jabbing, shouting, roaring. The great cat, confused and wary, withdrew into the grass. For the first time, Homo erectus had repelled a predator by choice, not chance. And so began their transformation. From hunted to hunters of fear itself. The hunt of the saber-tooth. The day came when hunger pushed them beyond defense. The herd animals had fled far south, water was scarce, and the crocodiles still dominated the rivers. The tribe looked at one another, gaunt and weary, and made a decision unthinkable to their ancestors. They would hunt the saber-tooth. At dawn, they tracked the beast. Its prints were massive, pressed deep into the soil, circling near the watering holes where prey gathered. The hunters followed in silence, carrying spears hardened in flame, torches smoldering, and stones to throw. When the beast appeared, it was magnificent. Muscles coiled beneath golden fur, fangs curved like ivory scythes, eyes gleaming with ruthless intelligence. It growled, low and thunderous, as if mocking the boldness of these fragile bipeds. But the humans did not scatter. They encircled it, flames held high. The saber-tooth roared and charged, leaping with terrifying speed. Spears flew, striking its shoulder, its ribs, its flank. The beast crashed into one hunter, claws tearing flesh, but before it could deliver the killing bite, another drove a flaming spear into its side. The cat snarled, thrashing, but the tribe closed in, each thrust more confident, each shout louder. Fire scorched its fur, spears pierced its hide, and at last, with a final roar that shook the earth, the saber-tooth collapsed. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the ragged breaths of hunters and the crackle of torches. They had slain the terror of the grasslands, feast of the victor. That night, the tribe celebrated a feast unlike any before. Meat roasted over fire, fat sizzling, bones cracking as marrow was shared among the young. The hide was stretched and dried, the fangs pulled and admired, not as curses, but as trophies. The elders sat close to the fire, their voices low but proud. This is more than meat. This is a turning of the world. For generations, fire had been a shield. Now, it was a sword. The river kings. Yet one challenge remained: the crocodiles. The saber-tooth had ruled the land, but the rivers were still the dominion of ancient killers. Every attempt to drink or cross came with the risk of death. Homo erectus grew restless. To claim the land fully, they could not remain prisoners of the riverbanks. So they devised a new plan. At twilight, hunters cut long branches, binding them with sinew into crude rafts. Firebrands were tied to the ends, burning fiercely as they drifted on the current. Then, with shouts and splashes, they drove herds of animals toward the water. The crocodiles struck, bursting from below, but were met not with helpless prey, but fire. Flames seared their eyes as hunters thrust spears into their jaws, torches into their nostrils. One massive beast, blinded and furious, thrashed against the current until its armored back was riddled with wounds. At last, it drifted lifeless downstream. The tribe roared their triumph, their voices echoing across the water. For the first time, they had struck terror into the lords of the river. The birth of dominance. As the weeks passed, the tribe grew bolder. Fires were built not just for warmth, but as weapons. Spears were crafted sharper, tipped with stone and hardened by flame. Hunts became coordinated, predators were challenged, and territories once forbidden were now crossed with confidence. The predators still lurked, silent, patient, deadly. But something had shifted. No longer were humans at the bottom of the chain. No longer were they shadows stealing scraps. They had learned to fight as one, to wield fire as a living ally, to turn fear outward. And though they could not yet know it, this was the beginning of a story far greater than themselves. The story of humanity's rise. Outro. The dawn of a new age. The fire crackled in the night, its smoke rising to the stars. Around it sat Homo erectus, scarred but proud, their bellies full, their minds sharper than ever. The saber-tooth cats still prowled. The crocodiles still lurked. But in their hearts burned something stronger than fang or scale, an idea that they could endure, that they could fight, that one day they would not merely survive in a world of beasts, they would conquer it.